Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, world. Welcome once again to Tuesday Talk with Key West Lou. I am your host, Louis Patrone. Another big week, my friends. A lot of things happening. The world is upside down, unquestionably. That happens to be the title of my book I wrote this past year, The World Upside Down, because it is, and everything that has occurred this week is proof of it. If you wish to call in and speak with me, the number is 646-478-5731. I repeat, 646-478-5731. Okay, let's give it a shot here. What are we going to talk about first? We are going to talk about contraception. Yes, my friends, I'm directing this to the ladies primarily. Contraception is back on the table again. It's being discussed. It's being discussed by the male members, all of them, of the United States Supreme Court. It's being discussed by the old Southern Republicans in the Senate. Hip, hip, and hooray. They're back again with that issue that we all thought was dead decades ago. Here's how it came about. They want to take it away from you. They want to take contraceptive use away. What they want to do is have it blocked. Obamacare cannot pay for contraception. Women are going to have to be on their own hook and continue buying it as they did before out of their own pockets before Obamacare. Hobby Lobby was decided last week on a Monday. I discussed it with you. Hobby Lobby was a strange decision. It was a 5-4 decision. One of the men decided with the three women in dissenting. It had to do with a family-held small corporation. I think the corporation consisted of 5 people. They did not want to provide contraceptives or funding, in effect, through Obamacare that they were paying for contraceptives that could be used for abortion purposes. There was a listing of 20 different contraceptives. Only 4 were possible or might cause an abortion. The court intermingled the words abortion and contraceptive throughout the lengthy decision, which I found confusing. Many in the media did. Many of you who listen to the show or read my newspaper column or read my blogs found it confusing also. I had a little give and take with some of you. I thought it was abortive contraception they were talking about, 4 different contraceptives. Some of you thought it was all contraceptives. Most people did, including the media at the beginning. And the thing was confusing. And that, generally, we thought was the end of the issue. Let's see what's going to happen next. But I was convinced, I'll say quite frankly, it was abortive contraception, 4 different types of contraception. This past week, on Thursday, 3 days after the Hobby Lobby decision that I have just explained, came Wheaton College, decided by the United States Supreme Court. This was a little bit different, and here's how this came down. Wheaton College says, hey, we don't believe in contraception, and in order to avoid paying for contraception through the policy we have to pay for our employees under Obamacare, we have to sign what is called a self-certifying certificate saying we do not wish to comply on religious grounds and submit that to the government. And then the government will give us a pass and say you don't have to, and we'll make arrangements to pay for the contraceptive provision through other means so the employee doesn't get hurt. Well, Wheaton College says, if we even got to sign the certificate, that's sort of doing something under the contraception provision of Obamacare, and it still violates what I say are my religious rights. It offends me. And so they said, look, we got our case pending before you, the Supreme Court of the United States. It won't be heard for a long time. But while we're waiting, we want you to get us off the hook. We don't want to sign the certificate even while we are waiting. Because, again, why should we go through this all and you decide for us, but we spent several months violating our religious principles. So the government says, yeah, you're right. And in a 6-3 decision, all the males voting in favor, they said, you don't have to sign anything. You don't have to do anything. The government will worry about how the women are going to get their contraceptive coverage. And we're going to discuss this issue further when we write our decision on the big case, when we hear it several months down the road, the main case. And, don't be concerned that this indicates what we are going to decide in the end. The three ladies on the Supreme Court dissent. Sotomayor was very strong in her dissent. And once she thought that everyone on the Supreme Court, the men had sandbagged the ladies. On Monday they thought one way, and now comes this emergency application on Thursday, because these things just come up quick for injunctive relief, as Wheaton College was seeking, and they vote and say, the whole contraception issue is on the table now, when they had said in the Hobby Lobby decision 3 days before, it was only abortive contraception. So she also said this, and I think this is very important. You guys better worry, because this decision is undermining the confidence of the Supreme Court. Undermining the confidence of the Supreme Court. And she's right. I have been saying for 3 years, we need a new Supreme Court. We either get it election-wise, but in other words, we keep a Democrat in office as president, and you need a Democratic Senate under the Constitution, and then if one of them resigns or dies, one of the Republicans, the president will replace him under the law, and I assume it will be a Democrat who has some sort of a liberal streak, and the problem's solved. Or you do what they did in Iceland. You throw out the whole government, which we should do around here. One way or another, we have to change it. Iceland in 2008, when the bank crisis occurred, threw out the Constitution, threw out the government, wrote a new constitution, elected a new government, and sent bankers to jail. That was behind the whole issue. They were too big to go to jail up there, too, but they stood up to them. We have a problem. They're back in the bed. Your bed and mine, because I'm concerned whether a lady I'm with should or maybe wants to practice contraception. The government does not belong in our beds. It does not belong in our bedroom. And basically what they're doing here is coming after women's rights, the right of privacy, and the right of a woman to make her own decisions as to her body. Which now brings me to police brutality. There is an epidemic in this country. I think you're aware of it. Of police brutality. Look at what was on television this past week. I think it was a California highway police officer. Some woman apparently was deranged or not deranged, but she was running through heavy traffic, and he ran after her and got her, and he put her on the ground, and she's giving him a fight. This is a big guy, and this is a little skinny old lady, but she's giving him a fight. He starts cold cocking her. This guy's hitting her hard with his fist. While she's laying on the ground, he is sitting on top of her. He's hitting her in the head repeatedly with his fist. Fortunately, someone going by stopped, looked, and took out his camera and videoed the whole episode. So at least it's under investigation. There are no lies starting this thing off, though the police officer's department said he was merely exercising his duty. We will see. But here's what I want to talk about when I talk about police brutality. In the last 10 years, there was a study that just came out. In the last 10 years, police officers have killed 5,000 people. Some good, some bad. They've killed 5,000 people in 10 years. Do you know how many soldiers were killed in Iraq? How many of our boys and girls were killed in Iraq in what was an 8 to 10 year war? In that war, 4,489 American soldiers were killed. So in the same period of time, the same 10-year period of time, the police officers in this country killed 5,000 people, when only 4,500 were killed in the war in Iraq during the same time frame, basically. Is something wrong? I think so. Now, why is this happening? Well, first you got to go back in history. In 1994, we're no longer worried about Russia. I think it was 1989 or 1990 that Russia broke up. The Soviet Union broke up. So the United States government said, we got all this military equipment. We do not need any more. It's surplus because we're not worrying about Russia. They're not our enemy. Russia no longer exists. So what did our government do? They passed this law to give surplus Cold War military equipment to police departments. Now they're still doing this. And as Afghanistan, as Iraq, keyed down, slowed down, came to an end purportedly, they sent the excess military equipment, the not required any longer military equipment, to police departments also. Our police departments, as a result, my friends, are now militarized. Ain't no more riding in the police car or on a horse alone and the pistol on the hip. They've got the best guns, the best armor to put on their chest. They've got these big vehicles that are bigger than tanks to go down the street, all because our government gave it to them. All I'm saying is, somehow, I think this has affected the minds of police officers. You can't kill 5,000 people in 10 years if that number is more than were killed in a war in Iraq in the same period of time. This is an epidemic. It represents, it exemplifies an epidemic of police brutality. Let's talk about those kids, those children who have come across the border and continue to come across the border in Mexico. They are coming from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. We must first understand clearly, because we've all learned things in the last 2 or 3 weeks since this whole situation developed. I'm talking about the 52,000 young children who have escaped from these 3 countries and either were bussed up or brought up with coyotes. A lot of them walked. Some of them walked the whole way. It's 1,000 miles. And came across from Mexico at the end, swam across or got in rubber boats and paddled across the Rio Grande River, came into Mexico, over overburdened Texas. Our government has stepped in. We're taking the children and spreading them to different cities around the country in different facilities. Just how are you going to handle this? This has nothing to do with immigration. This has to do with a humanitarian crisis. These are children. Some of them are under 1. They're carried in by their teenage mothers to 17 years old. They are leaving these countries because they're afraid of being killed. The drug cartels, they have gangs. These gangs have taken control, especially in Honduras and Guatemala. They run up and down the streets killing people, including these children. Forget the parents, these children. These kids are escaping these countries, there's no question about it, to escape the death that very probably could occur as regards them. Again, this is a crisis, a humanitarian one. We've seen it happen elsewhere in the world where a group of people move from one country to another. Here it's children, which makes that crisis or that cross we are confronted with doubly heavy. Obama said, I need some money. He sent a letter to Congress last Monday. And he said, I need $2 billion to take care of these kids. I got to feed them. I got to clothe them. I got to shower them. I got to get people to watch them. I've got to send them through a system to decide if they can stay or they got to go back. We need everything. Give me $2 billion immediately. Well, I said last week, and I said the week before, the world is watching us. The whole world is watching us. They want to see how the United States, the light on top of the hill, the greatest country ever, the one critical of everyone else, how we are going to take care of a group that comes into our country looking for help, and whether we're going to do the right thing in the right time frame. And I said, I don't think we're going to do it. I worry. I believe we may have another Katrina in the making, which some people are saying now. Anyhow, Obama still doesn't have the money, and now it turns out today, we're told, that the $2 billion is really $3.7 billion, that Obama has asked for almost double what he initially wanted because he needs money also to strengthen the border, add more judges to hear the cases of these children, to provide them due process before we toss them out of the country. And now the Republicans and Democrats are trying to decide, in the House of Representatives especially, are they going to give Obama that money? In the meantime, these 52,000 children are sleeping in warehouse-type facilities, body to body on the floor, similar to the slave trade ships back in the 1600s, with the one exception. They don't put the kids on top of each other. They're just next to each other, touching each other in one level, not several levels. These children are sleeping under blankets in some instances. In other instances, aluminum foil. They're given sheets of aluminum foil because body heat will be contained if the foil's on top of their body, and it will heat them. There aren't enough toilets. There aren't enough showers. Some of these kids have gone 10 days without a shower, or get a shower with every 10 days. It's a mess. We know immigration's a mess. This is worse, you know. God is testing us. I've got to say it that way. And the whole world is watching again. And I don't know. And I don't even think we can send them back. Not legally. Let me say this to you. Legally, they should all go back probably. But as one immigration expert, a lawyer who's an immigration expert, he expressed himself on the issue this week. He says, break the law. Do the right thing. Let them stay. Do not send them back. Because if you send them back, he said, they return to death, rape, and slavery. Are we going to be that kind of a country that does that? I want to stay with this issue for a moment of these children who have immigrated en masse to the United States looking for a better way, because that's all it's about. Without parents, they're doing this. They're coming over. Let's go to Marietta, California. Marietta, California should be absolutely ashamed. They should get on their hands and knees and apologize. You all are aware of what occurred. Marietta was to be one of the places where some of these children would be sent. And 3 busloads came, and the people of Marietta, this was on TV, it was awful, were in the streets yelling and screaming, go home, we don't want you. Okay? And wouldn't let the buses discharge, wouldn't let the buses move, and would not let them discharge the children. Okay? They had signs everywhere, and they're yelling. And I don't know. To me, this isn't America. This is not the America I know. What has happened to us? I mean, have we become this calloused that we turn our backs on children? Maybe. Because it seems to me that maybe we don't care. We don't care about these kids. We only care about our own asses. And I think if that's the case, and I sort of believe it is, it's the 1%, 99% thing again. The 99% are without in this country. They have difficulty, the 99%, feeding their own family, sending their kids to college, getting a job, getting a decent job. How can they have charity in their heart when they're hurting at the same time? They should. I mean, we should all be godlike all the time, but they're human. I'm not trying to justify what they did. I think it stinks. It sucks. I am ashamed to be an American when I look at them. That is not the America I know, knew, or want. Okay, now we're going to move on to, Athens. I haven't talked about Athens in a while. You know how much I love Greece. I've spent considerable time there in recent years. This is my time in Greece. I should be there for 2 months right now, and for personal reasons, I have not made the trip this summer. But friends of mine are back in Greece this summer, and they tell me of an interesting occurrence, something that is happening in Athens. You will recall the past 2 years I told you of the beggars on the streets of Athens. I'd never seen beggars before I saw them in Athens. You think you know what a beggar is. I thought I knew what a beggar is. Maybe a homeless person who's looking for a buck or a quarter or a dime, all right? And you give it to them. And there's a difference. Let me tell you, people argued with me at the time. I wrote a whole column on this and laid it out clearly. There's a hell of a difference, a big difference between a homeless person in this country and a beggar on the streets of Athens. I'm talking specifically of Ermou Street, E-R-M-O-U. It's the 10th most expensive shopping street in the world. It's the main shopping street in Athens. No motor vehicles. You walk down the streets. There's nothing. There's just rich stores on each side, some poor stores interposed, but they were rich stores, sold the best in ladies' dresses and shoes especially. Well, the economy's bad in Greece. Business has been bad. But prior to this year, beggars were on the streets the last 2 years, even when the economy had already gone down the tubes. It's worse today, I'm told. What do I mean by beggars? I told you in my book. I told you on television. I told you in my newspaper column. I saw a man. He had no arms. He had no legs. He was lucky he had a face. He had nothing but flesh hanging down. He had a little bit of hair on his head and it stuck straight up. And he was set down on his butt and balanced there. He couldn't see because his eyes were always up in the same direction. I sensed he couldn't see. He was blind. And he had a dish in front of him for money. That's a beggar, my friend, that we haven't seen yet in this country. And how many men and women sat there without arms or legs, at least they had one, and were begging? How many mothers with little babies would come up to you? The mother looks emaciated, the baby looks emaciated, and the mother sticks the baby out with one hand and holds her open hand with the other to get some money. I never saw anything like it. And believe me, you haven't either unless you've been there to some other place in the world that has begging of this nature. Well, what do you know? They're not there anymore. There are no longer beggars on the main commercial street of Athens where they had been for the last 20, 30 years. And why? Because business has gotten so bad that no one's going down to that street to shop. More stores are closed. More of the good stores are closed. There's very little foot traffic, so there's very little money available for these beggars. And I'm not talking one or two beggars. That'd be 20, 30 beggars. It's only a 5-block length of the street. It had to be 20 or 30 beggars every day. The street now is mostly kids, especially at night. People over 30 are told not to even go down the street. They're kids who are playing music, doing a little junk, smoking a little pot, probably snorting some heroin or cocaine, smoking crack, and adults are told to stay away. Why did I tell you about this? Because that's how bad the economy is now in Greece. It's gotten much worse. And people, the beggars I'm talking about, they don't even have a place, and I'm going to say, sound strange the way I'm going to phrase it, to earn their living, which was by begging. Going to move over now to GMOs. Well, before I get to GMOs, I want to talk about Eric Cantor. Let me talk about Eric Cantor for a minute. You know he got beat in the Republican primary, majority leader, Republican of the United States House of Representatives. The next day after he had been defeated, Boeing stock dropped dramatically. Biggest drop since the first of the year. Boeing makes airplanes. Why? Because Cantor was Boeing's man in Washington, their man on the Hill. To show you how important Cantor is to what Boeing wants in Washington, you know, Cantor's supposed to be the people's man. He's corporate America's man. Boeing raised $5.4 million. I repeat, $5.4 million for the primary, which he lost. And you got to look at the numbers. The year before, in 2013, Boeing made $11.6 billion off of Cantor's efforts. They raised him $5.4 million, but they made $11.6 billion the year before to things he did that were of benefit to them. And one of these things is this bank, the Export-Import Bank, that finances contracts with foreign countries. Boeing would sell 50, 60, 70 airplanes to some country. We, the United States, would guarantee or finance the deal. Boeing would go to some country and say, look, you can buy 60 planes. We got the financing all set up at a cheap rate through the American Bank, Export-Import Bank, and the deal's done. Well, The bank is coming up for renewal this year. It's only good for 3 years. It has to be reauthorized. Cantor was pushing it, and it was going to be reauthorized. It ain't now, and because the new majority leader says he doesn't support it. And all I'm trying to say is that's how our government's run today. It isn't government of the people, by the people, for the people. It's government of the corporations, by the corporations, for the corporations. Which brings me very quickly now, because I know the time for the show is running down. I want to hit GMOs quickly, genetically modified organisms. We're going to Cordoba. Cordoba is a city and a province in Argentina, big into the GMO business. Monsanto's building a plant to make pesticides, Roundup, the strongest pesticides in the world. They use pesticides extensively and exclusively in the agricultural fields of Argentina. The crop is soybeans. Soybeans. They do an extensive soybean business, and they get a lot of money for their soybeans. They sell them worldwide. They're sold for oil and for protein. And the United States is a big buyer of their soybeans. The problem is this. The pesticides, they did a study. The government of Cordoba did a study. I'm laughing, but this is what they did. They did a study. An 8-year study showed that cancer doubled in the last 8 years since Monsanto and other companies have been there using pesticides on the soybeans and making seeds and using these GMO things in other products. And now Monsanto wants to build a new pesticide plant, and the people are up in arms. They're saying no. But this is what happens. It could happen. Someone at least is paying attention in Cordoba. Someone cares. Which brings me now to Australia. Australia needs milk. And guess what they're going to do? They have announced they are going to produce genetically modified milk. They're going to do it by using ryegrass to feed the cows. They've got a modified ryegrass that they're using. They're growing with genetically modified seeds, and this will increase the milk production, and the cows will give more milk, except nobody knows what's going to happen to the humans who drink the milk. Very quickly, the show's coming to an end. GMOs and Hillary Clinton. I'm disappointed. This past week, Hillary spoke at a meeting in Hampton, New Hampshire of the biotech firms. I'm talking about the GMO people and the agri-farms. And she said, I support GMOs. She thinks people have a poor perception of GMOs because the sound of it scares people. I think she's on the wrong track. And that's the story about GMOs. And interesting, that's the show for this week. I'm glad I joined you. I'm glad you joined me, excuse me. I love doing the show, and I'm glad you listen. If you have an opportunity, read my book, The World Upside Down. You can find it on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com, because if you like this show, you'll like the book. If you don't like the show, don't buy the book. Thank you again for joining me. I look forward to speaking with you next week at this time. Good night.